Outa-space, International Arts and Class Struggle podcast. In this week's show, Divided Sweden Part 1, the Hammerkullen model. Comments and views from Paranoid Paul in the space station, and music from Clicken, Bundna till Historien. Okay, so today we have Kristopher Lundberg from Hammerkullen, a suburb of Gothenburg in Sweden. Kristopher is a leading member of the Socialist Justice Party. He's also formerly the West of Sweden chair of the Tenants Union. He's a tenant activist. I've known him for some time. For me, he's a little bit like what you might imagine a Viking warrior would be in the socialist struggle. At the same time, a man with a massive heart and a real interest in the arts. So we're bringing on Kristopher today to learn a little bit about the stuff they're getting on with over in Gothenburg. So hi Kristopher, how you doing?
Hello, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
No worries, man. Well, that's my little introduction about you. How would you explain yourself? What's your view of you?
Now I think it was a good explanation of me. I'm a tenant activist. I'm a political activist. I'm a community organizer. Mostly in my area, Hammerkullen, but also in Gothenburg and the rest of West Sweden. And as a socialist, I try to bring the different struggles together in a struggle for socialism.
Cool, man. Well, I think many people that are listening to this podcast may not know where Hammerkullen sits in Sweden, the nature of the area. I mean, some people on the left still point towards Sweden as being this social democratic model of socialism. And, so I'm kind of interested, first of all, just to sort of set a picture for our listeners about where is Hammerkullen? Where's it come from? Give us some background to the area and how it sits in the Swedish situation.
Yeah, it's Hammerkullen is a working class suburb in the periphery of Gothenburg. It's in the northeast of the city, and it's an area with, on paper, 8,000 inhabitants, but in fact it's probably around 10,000 in the area. And 84% of the population has a migrant background, mostly from Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. The area is mostly public housing, and 80% of the apartments was built. Not only the apartments, the apartments and the small houses was built during the 60s as a part of the Millennium Program. That was a program to make 1 million houses during a period of 10 years. So it's an area with old apartments, which is actually in a quite bad condition, with a need of renovation. And in the area, it's around 15 unemployment. That can be compared to
15%.
Yeah, 15% of the population is unemployed, and that can be compared to Gothenburg, that was around 5% before the Corona crisis. So it's 3 times higher in Hammerkullen than in the rest of Gothenburg. But if you look at the youth, the youth unemployment is 30%.
Right.
So it's a very hard condition for the working class youth.
Is it an area of high social problems then? And how does it? That's one question for you. And how does it sit geographically? Because I think that's an important question as well to the rest of Gothenburg.
I mean, it's in a suburb outside of the city center. So you can see like the city center is in the middle, and then you have the working class suburbs like Hammerkullen, Bergsjön, Biskopsgården, and so around surrounding the city. So it's really the periphery of the city center.
And in that way, it's very separate, would you say?
Yeah. It's separated not only by distance, it's also separated by the feeling from the population. It's like all the different suburbs are like islands isolated in themselves. So if you live in the area, you don't go to the city center much, but you don't go to other suburbs either. It's like you have your own little community in the area.
And also, I would imagine if an international visitor went to Gothenburg on their holidays, they would never see such a place. You know, it's what you see when you come to Gothenburg as a tourist. You wouldn't see the working class areas. Then is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, when you come to Gothenburg and you go to to get a tourist program or something, they will show you the museum in the city center and things like that, even if we have a lot of art even in the periphery areas and in the working class suburbs. But they will show you what's in the city center, the restaurants in the city center, and so on.
So it's an area of high unemployment. Does it have other social problems that a lot of other sort of major cities have?
I mean, it's 85% of the youth are not studying after elementary school. And of course, if you have, and it's a very young population in the area. So you have a young population, they are unemployed, they are not going to school. A lot of the former social service and places to be are closed by 30 years of neoliberal politics. So of course, what's left for the youth to be doing is to hang out in the parks and hang out in the squares, and of course that can not by itself create problem, but when you're unemployed, you lack of money, and you need to survive, of course there is gangs and so on that can recruit you to sell drugs or be a part of that kind of
that kind
stuff.
of thing. I mean, I think it's safe to say that many of the major cities around the world, particularly in Europe, though, would have these kind of working class areas which are sort of isolated away, where high unemployment, low expectancies, all these kind of things, and particularly with a very high young population in the period that we were in, but also the period we're going into when there's going to be less jobs, more lower paid work and the rest. It's quite an explosive potential situation then in an area that you're in. Yeah, you'd agree with that more or less?
Yeah, it is. And it's, I mean, Gothenburg and Stockholm is probably two of the cities, and maybe together with Malmö in the south of Sweden, is probably the cities in Europe that is hit hardest by gang violence and shootings.
I remember the first time I came to visit, actually, I think the week before, there'd been somebody shot in your neighborhood. And and it was interesting for me because I came with this, oh fucking hell, I'm coming to this hardcore area. There's always going to be all this hassle and shit, and and I'm going to be done over by gangs, and my pretty white face is going to be robbed, and all that kind of paranoid kind of attitude that people can come with sometimes. They follow you. And there had been a shooting just before I came. And then when I came, I found something completely different to the way that it was being portrayed. Is that a problem for you guys?
I mean, we have social problems, of course, but it's not as much as it's portrayed in the media, in the way that other people looking in the area and so on. Mostly, actually, the area is a very social area. It's a lot of love and pride in the area, and it's rich of culture. It's culture associations, migrant organizations, political and culture organization and work and so on going on all the time. So it's
well, that's one of the reasons I wanted you to come on the show, actually, because I think it's kind of known around Gothenburg as the Hammerkullen model, and the arts and the social movements and these kind of things, and I think one of the reasons, it's definitely one of the reasons to invite you on, because I think people internationally need to hear about different approaches that socialists and activists and people in the arts use. So could you explain a little bit about what the Hammerkullen model is, and a bit of history and a bit of present day? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's if you look at the Hammerkullen model, you can't see it as a model that is set up now or something like that. It's been a process in the area since it was built in the beginning. But if we see at the first refugees that came to the area in the beginning of the 70s, mostly of them came from Latin America. It was political activists, trade union activists. They came with a lot of experience of social work, political work, struggle, and so on. And that was really implemented into the soul of the area from the 70s. They took with them their traditions of struggle and culture and so on. And all the different migrant groups or refugees that came afterwards has becoming a part of this tradition of struggle in the area. And since the 80s and the bourgeoisization of the social democracy, the area has been hit by cutbacks, privatization, and so on. And then it has always been a struggle against this taking place. And because of this, it has grown a special tradition in the area that, of course, has been helped by that the left in general is strong in the area. So I would say that the area today it's poor financially, but it's rich of culture, social work, political organization, and resistance. And this has grown together to be very effective to organize together.
Okay, so what you're talking about here is, is quite at the heart of this podcast's reason for existing. And you're talking here about a strong left current in the neighborhood. And you're also talking about the traditions of the Latin American struggle that came from the 70s, which, they were fighting, they were fleeing from military dictatorships and the like. So those are the type of people that came to Sweden in that period. And then they fused with the new layers of immigration that came in. Just for interest's sake, which communities are, I think there's probably lots, but which communities are very strong in the Hammerkullen area Which actual communities, from which countries did a lot of the immigration come from?
I would say that the three biggest would be the Somali community, and then it's the Kurdish community and the Latin American community. But then, I mean, there is lots of different language speaking in the area, and different cultures and groups and so on. But that's the main three.
Okay, and then tying that together is a strong left movement that comes from all of those places and from Swedish history as well, I imagine. So that for me creates this like one world in one place kind of thing. And obviously the mixing of cultures then must be quite dynamic. I would have thought with the kind of things that you're saying. So can you give us some sort of examples or ideas about the history of how the arts and cultures has developed in the area on its own, but also with this political sort of backdrop that we've just talked about? How do those two things merge?
Yeah, I mean the Latin Americans, they took the tradition of a carnival with them, and since the 70s that it has been a carnival once a year in the area, where it comes 40,000 visitors from the rest of Gothenburg to Hammerkullen. So it's a population with between 8,000 and 10,000 in the area, but on the carnival it comes 40,000 visitors. And this has been like a carnival of course of culture, dance, music, poetry, and so on. But it's also a question of politics. For example, after one of the shootings, all the different dance groups had slogans in the carnival of "drop the guns, stop the violence," but also raising the question of more money to the schools, more money to social service, and so on. So the culture and the politics is always coming together, and that could also be seen in the Urban Art Festival that we were one of the organizers together with other associations and art groups in the area, where the Urban Art Festival was a festival from below, organized by the community, and we had the international visitors, and the international artist was there not just to create from their mind, but create from the area and the thoughts from the inhabitants. And what you could see in the art that was created, it was a lot of symbolic art from struggle. We have a 10-meter long fist symbolizing the struggle in the apartments for tenants' rights. We had your art piece with the struggle at sea, with also 3 fists symbolizing the refugee struggles. And we can see that when the community participating in anything we do, it's always become a part of the political struggle in the area, even if it's social work or artwork and so on.
Yeah, I mean, for people who are listening, on our Facebook group and on our other social media, we'll put visuals, because obviously art is a very visual thing, and so people will be able to see the works that Kristopher's talking about. But one of the things that we're going to talk about in another podcast, so we're going to have a chat with Daniel Terres about graffiti and this kind of art in Gothenburg. But the one thing that hit me when I visited Hammerkullen was that I understood that there was like this zero policy idea to graffiti, and then I turned up in Hammerkullen. And this is an area for people that are listening in that's got, you know, big working class flats, you know, that exist everywhere. And then the one thing I saw when I first arrived was the most ginormous murals that I've ever seen in my life, you know, which covered the whole parts of the building. And, you know, not only, you know, the one thing about Hammerkullen that's really, you cannot miss it, is, I don't know how many murals you've got, but I think you have about half a dozen ginormous murals on the side of the buildings, and they're of a political character. And I think this is significant. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that came together and what that symbolizes for the area?
Yeah, it was from actually this urban art festivals has becoming a tradition. So every year there is 2 or 3 new murals that's coming, and it's really, it's a good symbol from the area, because it's we have seen during the years that it's very expensive art coming from the outside. The console buy art from some famous artists, and it's put in the area. And this is an area with a lot of artists, and that created a reaction that why shall art come from the outside when we can create? It become a discussion who owns the public space, who has the right to create art, who has the right to consume art, and yeah, who is the one that owns the public space. And we started by different art projects. We had something called the mosaic fabric that also was created from below, with a local artist creating huge walls of mosaic art together with the youth in the area. And that was actually one of the beginnings of this public art work. And then afterwards we had this art festivals. That it's quite unique, because now after Hammerkullen become like a model of art in the local areas, and now there is a lot of murals coming up in different areas in Gothenburg and outside Gothenburg in the cities, but they are totally different, because they are bought from the console, and it's some artists coming there and put it up. But what we do in Hammerkullen is that we do it from below. We organize it from below. We organize the community. It's like learning by participation. So we had this huge mural that was painted like a wall of 100 meters, and it was hundreds of youth, grown-ups, pensioners that made this painting together in the area.
So sorry, go.
No, continue. Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to know how this fuses with the political struggle in the area, you know, because, you know, the idea of being organized from below on the ground, you know, you're talking here about political organizations of the left fusing with artists, you know, how does it help the movement in the area? And by doing that, has it brought you any victories in the political sphere?
Yeah, I a little bit lost the Hammerkullen model that you asked about before, because what we use, when we talk about the Hammerkullen model, it's the power from below, because we have during all these years been fighting to save the social service in the area, and for example, so Hammerkullen, it's hit by the neoliberal politics. But if you compare to other areas, we have a quite good condition, because we have this tradition of struggle. So for example, in Biskopsgården, during the 80s, they had eight youth centers. Today it's none. And in Hammerkullen, for example, we have one of the best youth centers in Sweden. And it has been saved 3 times. by social mobilization in the area, from the youth, from the workers, and from the area. And the library was going to close, and we saved it by struggle. The local swimming pool was threatened to be closed, and we saved it. It has been struggle to defend the public school. It's a lot of victories that's been in the area, and actually it has been probably for the last 20 years. It has been at least one big struggle a year to defend the area from cutbacks and privatization and so on. And we got sick of running to the fire. So, I mean, we say that in Sweden. I don't know if it's
put out the fires. Maybe
yeah.
Would be it.
So it's we wanted to create something where we put the agenda.
Yeah.
So we started on our initiative in the Socialist Justice Party, which is a very strong party in the area. If you compare to all the other parties and organizations, so we are the second biggest after the Social Democracy in votes, but in membership and in work, we are the biggest organization in the area. And what we did was that we started to invite all the main workplaces, all the main trade unions, and the main migrant associations and organizations in the area to one united forum. And that forum has been really a forum of power in the area, because before we had meetings with the school and the teachers union to defend the school. And then we had meetings with the youth and the staff at the youth center to defend the youth center. And then we had meetings with the lifeguard of the swimming facility to defend it. And we saw like we need to bring all this struggle together, and we need to put we need to take power in the area together. So we created this forum where we meet regularly, all the main workplaces, the trade unions, the tenant unions, and the refugee and migrant organizations, where we discuss what's the most important question today. And then we run that together. So maybe it's to defend one of the refugee associations' office not to be closed, or it's to defend, to demand more money to the schools, or to take power of the renovation of the square, or different things. This forum, we run the questions together now. So we really organize the whole area together as a center of local working class power, actually. And from that, we had the possibility to go to the public housing company and saying, we want these walls to make murals on them. And it was like a question from the area. It was not a question from one art group, or it was not one question from one artist. It's a question from the area. And then it's a total different thing when we go to the company and say, we want the wall to paint on.
Yeah, so what you're talking about really is the power that the workers' movement has always had. This idea of pulling everybody together under one banner, under one roof, and then fighting together, because it's our collective strength that is the power of the working class. This is in the fight against the capitalist system, and it sounds like to me that you inject heavily in the cultural and artistic work to not only reflect it, but actually as a part of building that cohesion, building those structures up. And obviously, that I think that's a really important thing. And I can see as well that, you're talking here about a small area. So you're talking about a micro experiment, which is possible in a small area, that could maybe be exported out. And this kind of brings me to a point I want to raise. It's what opposition do you get? Because at the beginning of the program, I introduced you as the former chair of the West Sweden Tenants Association. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to ask you this question at the end. Because this is a great project. Sounds cool. Sounds like you're pulling the community together. Sounds like the cohesion of the area. It's got social problems, etc., saving sports centres, all the rest of it. Who's in opposition to you? Who doesn't want you to do what you're doing?
I mean, I would say that, of course, in all these struggles that we've been into, it has been a struggle against the social democracy that has been running the city for like 40 years or something.
So just to remind the listeners, this is the social democracy that many on the left talk about as a model. So what we're counterposing here is two different models, and I think that's important just to point out there. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's an important aspect of this discussion.
Yeah, definitely. So mostly of the struggles has been against the social democracy, but they also has been in periods in coalition with the left party, but they are not at the moment. And also the social democracy, they lost power at the last election in the city. So the last struggles has been against a very weak right-wing council. But of course, it's opposition from the bosses in the area, from the private companies in the area, but mostly from the social democracy and their bureaucracy inside of the trade unions, inside of the tenant unions, and of course inside of the council and of the official powers. Yes. So, for example, I was 2 years ago. I've been a tenant activist for 9 years. Worked locally in Hammerkullen and in Angered. And the last 2 years, I was the chairperson or the president of the regional tenant union, which then had 77,000 members. And during these 2 years, I have tried to use Hammerkullen as a model to spread this model to other places in the region and to give local power to the communities over housing, the local area, and so on. And also to politicize the movement, to be more offensive, to be more struggling and combative. And that, of course, has a opposition from the bureaucracy in the tenant union. So now in April, I was expelled from the tenant union, and it's a decision from the social democratic controlled national leadership.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this brings into an interesting point that you gain a model, and then you clash against the system. So, I mean, maybe in a bit of a conclusion, we're going to talk about Hammerkullen model a lot on this show because I think it's a great example that we should show. And it seems to me that you've hit a bump in the road in terms of well, just from your position, because the Hammerkullen model is not about just you, but you're one of the most outspoken people. You're known quite widely across Gothenburg and Sweden as well. And so, sometimes the establishment wants to chop off of the head to kill the animal. But I don't think that's going to happen in Hammerkullen, because from what I've seen, it's far from just you. I've seen some, I'm lucky enough to have had some some personal contacts with the situation, and it inspires me to be with you and to work with those projects. But the question is, where do you go now? They've chopped your head off. They've got control of the bureaucracy. They've taken away what was rightfully the resources of the tenants union, and you were democratizing that union as well. And that was a challenge to their politics as normal, of the establishment. So, okay, you've hit a bump in the road. Just maybe to finish off this podcast with you, where do you go next? How do you see it unfolding? In the next little period.
I mean, the political work and the tenant work, for me personally, it didn't start in the tenant union. It will not end in the tenant union. I mean, it's I've been a political activist for 20 years, and what has happened, if we now go over to the tenant union, what has happened is that more and more radical youth and workers has entered the tenant union, and the struggle inside of the tenant union against the bureaucracy will continue, even if I'm not the chairperson in the region. And I mean, we never know how that goes. We know that during the 70s, they expelled a lot of members in the tenant union to keep the social democratic control of over the union. But for example, in the area of Hammerkullen, actually the main organizer of all this has been the Socialist Justice Party, and not the tenant union, even if I was also in the tenant union. And for example, we led a struggle to communalize 900 apartment that was privately owned, and that was a struggle from the Socialist Justice Party for 3 years. And after 3 years of struggle, the tenant union supported it, and we won. But actually, the tenant struggle and the political work and so on, it's a bump in the road, but we will continue to drive to the goal.
Cool. Well, I think hopefully we can highlight on the show a little bit of the work we're doing, and I think there's lessons from other left groups, for other arts and community associations in the work you do. So we'll finish there, Kristopher. Thanks very much for coming on the show, and we're going to follow your work with a close eye, and hopefully you can follow ours as well. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going up to the space station. Paul, are you there?
I'm here, Rob. I'm here.
Cool, man. So what did you think of the interview with Kristopher?
Well, really good, really interesting. I know that you've had a lot to do over there. You've done a lot of work with them. I saw some footage of you doing some sculpture work there, and I saw the extraordinary... Well, graffiti is a massive part of their life there, isn't it? I mean, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's... maybe we'll come on to my involvement a little bit in a while, but the graffitis, it's it's if you like, it's your regular working class estate on the edge of the city. That's one way. Right. But when you turn up and you are confronted by these ginormous building size murals, and of a highly political nature. One is of a refugee jumping over a fence, and it's as high, it's like you're talking 20 meters, 30 meters high, however big the building is, I don't know exactly. And then one of a massive, fist of struggle and this kind of thing. It does hit you. It's not normal in that regard. And the art, it's everywhere, all over the place. It's quite phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know much about graffiti normally, but I always think graffiti is sort of like somewhere between a kind of beautiful vandalism and a bona fide out right up their art form. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this was just extraordinary. I mean, and the scale of it. I mean, this isn't just somebody with a spray can having a go at the side of a train at night. This is like the entire side of a enormous tower block and stuff like that.
I mean, we will talk next week to Daniel about the graffiti question there, because there was a zero tolerance. I mentioned it in this interview, and we'll talk about it a lot next week. But it's worth mentioning that these graffitis were in response to a zero tolerance to graffiti, you know, and the law was changed a little bit, and then this was an outcome of it. So it was a reaction in and of itself. So yeah, very powerful stuff. And also graffiti is very, very democratic in the sense that everybody sees it. It's not tied away in a little gallery. It's right in front of you. That's and right. It's also, because of the size of it, it kind of, it has to reflect that community. Now, maybe there's some people there who don't like them. But in general, that's not the feeling I got. I got a feeling of people very proud of these graffitis.
Yeah. Well, it's quite beautiful, and there's a sense of them reclaiming the public space, which is something that came up in the interview with Chris, and you can't escape that. It feels like apart from the fact that most sort of tower blocks, you know, housing people that are disadvantaged economically, apart from the fact that they're ugly and meaningless in the way that they're designed, they're just like utilitarian. They have almost taken on a kind of, they've colonized that problem and made it a statement, and it's both a statement on the situation, and it's just heartening. But I mean, it leads me on to the questions I have about, you know, this extraordinary. I mean, how large an area is it? Is it an estate? Is it a small town?
Yeah,
is it a suburb all of its own?
I mean, it's like an estate which is part of a wider area called Angred, which is a series of different estates. Yeah, and this is like one suburb. But Hammerkullen and Angred itself in all the other areas is interesting too. But Hammerkullen is like only a very small area, really. You know, you're talking 10,000 people. You're talking. You know, it's not small, and it has two different areas. One with a lot of high rise, and one with lower sort of buildings of 3 or 4 stories. You know, and it doesn't take long to walk from one to the other, and it's set inside beautiful woods. Because what's interesting about Gothenburg and these estates and these millions of homes which were built back in the 70s, I believe, is that they were situated way outside the city, but actually in quite beautiful surroundings. So if you're there, you can go for a walk very quickly into the forest. And so it's kind of bizarre in that sense, and not the same as for us, how we would see an English estate. But you're right, these buildings are grey, dull. You know, they're degrading, you know, in that sense. They're built to put the workers in. They're not built for aesthetic beauty, you know, and this is an interesting architectural question we could come on to later, you know, in the series, that you can have sort of brutalized buildings which are quite beautiful. These are not. These have been made beautiful by quite an active community, and I think that's, you know, quite an interesting aspect of it.
I find it really life-affirming that they've done that. And like I say, there's a political issue of them reclaiming the public space and reclaiming it, not just with competence, but with, you know, I don't know what the word is to describe it, but it's the colours and everything. And not only is it that they're nice colours and they're nice to look at, they're meaningful. They have, there's a forcefulness to them. You know, you know, and they've commandeered this environment, which they've been. I mean,
I think you're right. You know, it is about reclaiming the space, but there's something that Kristopher said in the interview, which maybe was not picked up on so clearly, which I think should be, is that previous to doing this, then expensive art was bought by the city, and I've seen the piece that he was talking about, and it was helicoptered in, and they looked at how much it cost, and it was a fortune. And it was from an artist outside. Now, there's lots of art of local people there, but what these massive graffitis are from, and my involvement there, was that they decided from below, from the community, to invite their own international artists to come and do some art. And you think, okay, well, that's quite interesting, yeah. But what they did is they insisted, and this is where I got involved, they insisted that I came and lived there. You know, so it was like, not here's a job for you, come and make us a sculpture, you know, about us. It was actually come and live and learn about us and make a connection and come back, you know. So this relationship that I have now with Hammerkullen, and why I want to be a spokesman a little bit from the outside about it, is because I was invited in, you know. I was asked by them to express what you see, you know, and so I think that's what's also interesting, because it's not just like community gets together and they do a community mural, which that does also exist, and it's not as if there's like, not, you know, he talks about this youth center, it's fantastic, but what they've got there is this dynamic of almost self-control. You know, there are problems, it's not full unity, but you know, it's like sort of what's the word, autonomous control almost over their lives, that they're taking back a little bit, you know, and definitely I felt that by being there, you know, and I responded with, I've been there 3 times now, you know, and I've got 3 different projects that I've done, you know, and they've all been participation. They've all been about the community and myself working together, and them designing the work and physically doing it with me and these kind of things. So the dynamics there are really interesting from an artistic point of view. But I think what was really sort of, how can I say it, life affirming, I think the word you use for me, was this was such a diverse community that was so unified in one way, you know. And this was why Kristopher was saying that they'd saved the sports centre, they'd saved the youth clubs compared to other areas in Gothenburg. And I think that in itself is something that really needs to be shouted out, you know, in terms of art and politics.
I really agree. It was the unification that really stirred me, because, and I think for anybody listening, if you can, we're going to put a link, aren't we? If you can watch the video, even though it's not in English, it's worth watching a good, like, at least the first third of it at least, just to get, and just to visit this place, because it really does stir something in you when you see the work and the awareness that these are. I think we must be looking at the second generation now of people that migrated during the 70s due to various difficult political circumstances. From, you'd have to remind me, was it Latin America?
Yeah, Latin America. I mean, I know it quite well, so and Kristopher did say it, but I'll repeat it, that the first wave of immigration came from Latin America, and they were escaping, many of them, not just economic hardships, but brutal police dictatorships. And so they brought with them organisation and socialism and solidarity and trade unions.
There's something about the I know nothing about this, so I'm literally asking. But like, I gathered that the people that came brought a sensibility with them. They brought an approach, a sense of a social kind of conscience.
Yeah, it was political reasons that they left. They were ran out of town.
So they were alert to they weren't. So these weren't just people that had been ousted and they ran to the nearest sort of like country that would take them. They were targets of dictatorship, and as by virtue of that.
I mean, I don't know everybody, but certainly that is the depth. That was the depth, and then you have to remember what's fascinating. Kristopher said this as well, that the next layer of people, not the next one directly, but the more modern layers, have been Somalis, also gone through many difficult things, and also Kurdistan and Kurds, who is a highly politicalized thing. So you know, and each community would bring something different, but it's the layering of this, along with, if you can call it, the indigenous Swedish population, who are also themselves. There's a big socialist movement there, you know, and I don't know. It's that mix. It's kind of magic in a way, but the magic ingredient for me was the role of Kristopher and the people around him, and what they were, you know, and how they were pulling it together, and who they were fighting, you know, because I think this is important.
Now,
go on. Sorry,
I know that. I know we're on limited time, but there's so much here I want to talk about, and I guess you'll have to just sort of police how long we go into this. But
well, let's go a bit more
briefly,
because we're doing a double on this. We're going to do it next week as well. So let's have a couple more minutes, because I think this is worth the analysis.
What I get from this is that the one thing that bothers me more than any other about the state of the world we're in at the moment is the incapacity of people to get along with each other, whether that's because of culture, or whether it's because of class, or whether it's even because of gender. It really upsets me, because what I've noticed in my lifetime is a movement of people away from a desire to resolve and towards conflict. And what we have here is a desperate situation, people that were all desperately poor and ousted from their homeland for various reasons. And not only that, they've been able to open their arms to future incoming people. I'm sure it's not problem free. I gather from what you said, this is not a problem free situation, but whatever model it is, and I think you actually called it what did you call it?
It's a Hammerkullen model. Yeah, it's kind of known by that.
Is it referred to as that because it's happened this way and it's created this?
Well, because Hammerkullen is the name of the area, and they've done something they think is special, and they've tried to export it.
Yeah,
it's and this is what Kristopher and the Socialist Justice Party there are trying to do. They're making a model situation. It's not just them. No. There's others as well, and that would be wrong to say it's just them, but they're coordinating some of that with others in the local community from different historic backgrounds and whatever, and then they're making themselves proud, first and foremost, that they're a working class area, they're migrants and immigrants from different places, and they're unifying on that base. And I think you're dead right, it's not perfect. So I don't think we should what's the word, I don't think we should put it up in golden lights. Idealize it. We shouldn't do that, but what we, and I think you're right, what we do need at the moment in the world is examples, and what they're trying to do is create one. Whether they've succeeded, whether it's perfect, is not really the point. The point is that there's a strong urge there, and they're creating art. And they're creating quite fantastic art, one way or another, and they're also winning political battles. Yeah. And so these two things in tandem is what makes, for me, this a real place that we have to talk about, because even their ups and downs. And I was saying to Kristopher, because, he was expelled. He hit a bump in the road. He was the leader of the tenants union. The tenants union has a lot of resources, and it's dominated nationally by the Social Democrats, which are basically, they're a bit like Starmer's Labour Party. It's basically capitalism light, not that light sometimes, and so they bureaucratically got rid of him, and so this is an interesting the battle, if you like, where is it? And I get annoyed when I hear people sometimes say, well, the Scandinavian model of socialism is the way to go. And I'm thinking, really? Within Sweden, there's a big battle going on that needs to be highlighted to show the truth, I think. Anyway.
We always end up referring to Orwell at some point when we're talking about our social concerns and stuff like that. And, there's the bit in 1984 when Winston Smith says to O'Brien, the human spirit will rise up. And for some reason, that artwork on those buildings, that looked like the human spirit rising up and towering over everything. And I couldn't help but take that. And I'm going to remember that a long time, the image of those. Because it's not just graffiti. It's not just street art. It's almost a monument in itself. It's literally monumental. It's vast, and the work and the commitment and the focus. I think there's just one shot of a guy actually doing it on one of those. I think what you use to clean windows on the sides of office buildings. Yeah, and I just thought, for a moment, I just realised it really was I don't know if it was literally done by one man. It may have been. Was it?
No. I mean, like Christopher was saying, it's a growing thing. They've done them over a period of time. So when I got there, one of the festivals I was at, they did 3 or 4, but there was already 3 or 4 there. And actually,
I mean, is each work?
Each work? No, they do. There's some Latin American artists, definitely some Mexicans and a Chilean that are involved in that. So it's different people. And then there was also a community graffiti wall, which actually got painted over later on, a year later or so. So it's not a clear-cut thing, but what's interesting here is that push, that creative and artistic push mixed with the political unification, if you like, the willingness to fight for yourself, but also to feel proud of your communities. I often think about how many walls are there in our communities which are horrible, and how many talented artists are there. And really, is paint that expensive? Could we not have, could we not have a colourful world painted? But actually, so this is quite, for me, it's quite sort of confrontational, but also, it's got a lot of potential. I mean,
I don't mean to focus on the art and not the politics. You mentioned earlier that there is.
Well, they're intermixed, though, aren't they? Here, this is what's interesting about it. The political struggles.
Yeah, and then that's probably the point of the show too.
Yeah, but the political struggles there, you don't win unless you're united. And I think that's really the point here. I mean, I think I over a period of I was there for 9 weeks, even last year, and I did 40 different events as part of this participation monument. It was a lot. Yeah, it was fairly intense. But there's so many festivals they were having, and it wasn't just in the one area. I went to some of the other areas as well, because one of the things that they tried to do is export the Hammerkullen model idea, and I actually spoke to a manager in a neighboring district about a piece of artwork I was working with the community there with, and he said to me, well, look, Rob, this isn't Hammerkullen here, we're more conservative. And I was like, okay. And then we do our first event, and it's packed with Somali women and their families, and they're well into it. And I'm thinking, you think this isn't Hammerkullen? Every area could be Hammerkullen. One, you release the potential for people to be involved. And I think for me, the interaction with the Somali community was one of the more unusual things, but one of the more exhilarating things, because I hadn't had that contact before. And I went to the Somali Day event, and it was an extremely windy day, but it was like really powerful. But I felt like I was it was very much not a closed community, because it wasn't closed, but it was very much within the square of the local estate. So I felt very much like an outsider who'd been allowed in, and all the preconceptions were gone, because everybody was chilled out, everybody was dancing, everybody was being lovely, and I was in this, what felt like I might as well have been in Somalia kind of thing. But I was astonished by even myself, and I think I was quite an internationalist. I was astonished that I was not shocked, but I was like, my eyes were opened, And if you've got all these different communities opening each other's eyes, then you really have got a powerful thing on your hands, and authorities trying to shut that down, that's not easy to do.
Yeah. I mean, you did touch on the nature of the resistance to what they've achieved and what they're trying to push through. And I don't know if we want to maybe put that back for the next one or go into it now, but I'm aware that we flagged that up and we haven't gone into it, because there is almost a sinister sense about...
Let's have a couple of minutes on it.
Yeah. Please, yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'm assuming you've got stuff on this you want to say, so I was going to listen. I was just going to listen to you.
Well, I think, I pushed it a bit with Kristopher himself. He didn't come forward with it.
Yeah.
But I was a bit involved with the tenants union locally, and also nationally, because they saw some of the work that I was going on, and they were like, "Oh, that looks cool," I even went to the head office in Stockholm, very posh, very expensive office, And,
interesting contrast there.
Yeah, and actually, the people I was communicating with were great. Yeah, And then I thought, okay, this is cool. This is a really progressive organization. We're going to be able to do something here, you know? And then I see how they treated him, the leadership, that is, the bureaucracy, you know, and people I spoke to were like, I mean, Kristopher has a reputation of being a hell of a fighter. And they were scared of him and they had to get rid of him. And they didn't want Hammerkullens everywhere. And this, for me, is something to be noted. Yeah. And I think what the most important thing about it really was that Kristopher said, yeah, it was just a bump in the road. I didn't start, you know, it doesn't start and finish with one organization, you know, and I think it's worth us keeping our eye on this situation. Like I said, we'll have a double bill. We've got another point of view, not strictly just on Hammerkullen, but because what you've got in Gothenburg and in Stockholm, as Kristopher was saying, is all the estates on the edge of town. You know, it's not the same in every city, and they're very isolated. No. And there's a type of apartheid going on, you know, and I think that needs to be explained. If we can possibly to the audience we have, you know, to let them know that things are not all they seem in Sweden. So I don't know if you've got any more little questions about that or any points you want to make, but I think there's an interesting subject for us.
I'm fascinated, and I think I'll wind up by saying this. I think we're living in a time when we have a lot to be disappointed about, a lot to be very saddened about. I think with you and I in our lifetime have become very disillusioned with the Western model of democracy as it's sold to us and its failings. You know, I'm not saying democracy is bad. I'm just saying what it's become, and we've also become very cynical, almost as a matter of course. You know, as a way of surviving our disappointment with the modelling that we're dealing with, which is not. We expected a lot more of the West in the 21st century. You know, I think that's fair to say. I think we thought we would, as a civilized, you know, part of the world, having come out of World War II all that time ago, I think we thought we were building a model that was ideologically sound. And what do we find? We find corruption and racism and bitterness and disillusionment everywhere. This was like, you know, a beautiful idea that has actually something has come about, and a reminder that at the end of the day, the human spirit, when allowed to do what it needs to do and be what it can be, will be something decent and idealistic, and will fight hard for those things and also do it beautifully. And this is what I've got out of this little visit to Gothenburg, that you've brought to me and to the audience here, and that's what I got out of it. And I really think every series we're going to end up doing a couple of episodes on this place, don't you? Maybe.
Yeah, let's see how we go. And I agree with you, and I think you're right. And it's on that moment, let's kick you back out into space, shall we?
Yeah, I can't improve on that little rant.
I could hear Radio Jonas calling. I could shut those fucking guys up. They're going on today. Well, we're going on because we're inspired. Well done, Hammerkullen. Thank you very much. Next week, we're going to do part 2.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, man, you take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay then, so this week's music is from Clicken. They're a legendary rap group that are from Hammerkullen itself. The song is called Bundna till Historien. Sorry if that's pronounced terribly, but it means bound to history. Normally we would play the tune in the actual podcast, but I think it'd be important to get a bit more of a feeling for the area that we actually share their video, which is recorded in Hammerkullen itself. So have a look in the notes connected to the podcast and find the link to Clicken's video themselves. We hope you enjoyed the show today. If you have something to say or something to play or just want to hear more of our podcasts, then you can get in contact with us at outaspace.com. That's OUTA-space.com. Okay, take care now.